Welcome back to another episode of Dugout Talk. Today is March 2nd, 2021. Today we have episode 32, which is our Colorado Rockies edition. We'll go ahead and just jump right into this bad boy with a little baseball history. Um, so, my baseball history actually happened on 1927, which would be 94 years ago already. Babe Ruth, a relative baseball player. Some of you may have heard of him. He became the highest paid player in Major League history today in 1927 when the Yankees announced that the Bambino will earn $70,000 per season for the next 3 years. The Sultan of Swat, who originally went to the bargaining table expecting and demanding at least 100,000, met with Colonel Jacob Rupert at the owner's brewery in the Yorkville section of Manhattan to finalize his contract. So actually, there's a nice little newspaper clipping from a 1927 magazine saying the same thing I just did. So today on March 2nd, back in 1927, the Ruth became the richest player in baseball history.
It's 70,000 this season too. Um,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, that's actually pretty considering what we get with contracts nowadays. Uh, 70,000 almost. If someone was offered, I don't even think you can offer $70,000 contracts
No.
today. I think you can have that as like a signing bonus, but
Mm-hmm.
as an actual contract, that's a
Major
ton.
league players, at least.
Yeah, at least for major league players. So my day in history happened 25 years ago today in 1996. Two Japanese and two MLB umpires work a Pirates and Cardinals spring training matchup at Al Lang Field in St. Petersburg. There were two other Japanese umpires that work a Phillies and Blue Jays spring game down in Dunedin. And meanwhile, there are four MLB umpires on a 9-day tour in Japan's Nippon Professional Baseball League. And I believe what was going on here was they were trying to integrate Japanese and Major League Baseball, and I think that was the point of this tour was to give Japanese umpires a chance to actually work some Major League games and then have Major League guys go out to Japan. We actually see this pretty often now. This is the first time this happened, but the the Japanese All Stars and the MLB All Stars every 4 years, I believe, they'll meet up in Japan and play a series of games. And so the league will usually send a few of their umpires out to umpire these games, while the Nippon League will send their guys out. Uh, so there's a lot of integration that goes on here with this nowadays. This was kind of what paved that. The picture on the right is Takahito Matsuda. He was one of the umpires, one of the four Japanese umpires, to come over here and work the plate for one of those spring training games. So I thought this was kind of interesting, especially with how integrated and diverse the game is now. This is just kind of one of those days that baseball took a big step in trying to integrate the game even more between uh, the U.S. and other countries. By the way, Japan is really big on baseball. I don't know, for those of you watching, if you've never taken a chance to watch a Japanese professional baseball game, you should do it. They are very exciting to watch. Some of those, I would even argue that the Nippon Baseball League might have more popularity than Major League Baseball at this point. Their fans get really into it. They get a ton of support just from Japan in general. So if you ever get a chance to watch one of those games, do it. It's very well worth your time.
Absolutely. All right. Today we have the Colorado Rockies. We'll go over their 2020 season in review real quick. They finished 26 and 34 last year, fourth place in the NL West. They started 11 and 3. A lot of people were kind of crazy about that. You know, how in the world is this like average team 11 and 3? They were leading the league and everything. It felt like they actually had a 2 and 12 record directly. They ended up actually finishing 15 and 31 in their last 46 games. So a bad finish for the Rockies last year. Their offense played well enough, I should say. But as usual, pitching let them down. Seems to have been the case for probably the last decade and a half or so. Um, As I mentioned, their pitching was not good. They actually finished last in the following National League stats, that being ERA with a 5.59, hits of 579, or 9.6 hits allowed per game. They finished last in runs. They allowed 353, which equals out to 5.8 runs per game. And they finished last with 393 strikeouts, which I think also it came out to like 5.9 strikeouts per game or 6.5 or something like that. So not a good season for the Rockies.
No, it's really how their starts of the season went is a narrative of how almost every year goes for them. They are historically a very good April team. They always get off to a good start to the year, but as the year goes on, more times than not, they can't maintain that April success, whether it's because of injuries or whether it's because good teams that get off to slow starts start to catch their fire and they start to play well whenever they go and face the Rockies. There's a lot of different factors that always go in, it seems like, to them not playing good baseball throughout the year. I think the thing with the Rockies the last couple of seasons, though, is they have had a very good team on paper where they should be a winning team. We saw that in 2017 and 2018. They made the wild card both years in a row. 2019, they looked poised to do it again, but then they fell apart in September. And even last year, they should have been a team that even though they didn't have Ian Desmond, they had some key guys that were out last year. They still on paper were a team that should have been competing. Um, and I guess for Rockies fans, you can say that this is a common narrative for them. But the last couple of years, it's been really heartbreaking because they've actually had a solid team out there, unlike in previous years where they've kind of had some one-hit wonders and have gotten lucky and taken the league by storm. But this is just kind of it just sucks. It does. I feel for Rockies fans in this because it seems like they can never maintain consistent success, even when they have that capability to do it. There always seems to be something that prohibits them from being able to do it. The pitching narrative too, that's been a common theme, even though this pitching core that they have is probably the best pitching core they've ever had. It just goes to show that pitching at Coors Field and pitching in high altitude is a whole different ball game. And no matter how well you develop your guys, you're going to run into problems. They got the likes of Kyle Freeland and German Marquez, who are some of the better pitchers just in baseball in general. And even John Gray, who was a very highly touted youngster, came up to the team, and he hasn't really been able to be the same guy that they thought they were going to get out of him. And Freeland and Marquez, they have had limited success, but they've had their share of struggles too. So it's just a common narrative. Last year was a common narrative to how things have gone for the franchise in their nearly 30-year history. It's heartbreaking to see that they've had a really competitive team the last few years. Sure, making the playoffs twice, that's a huge win. That is a very huge win for a team like this to make it 2 years in a row. But they probably could have made it 4 years in a row if the talent had just been there. And granted, it's baseball; things are going to happen. But they haven't had a successful core like this in their franchise before, a consistently successful core like this before. So it's just sad to see it, really. The fact that they finished fourth place is probably lucky on their end. But we also talked about it yesterday. When you have losing streaks of 8, 5, 5, and 3 in a 60-game season, the Rockies went from 11-3 to, what'd you say, they went
2-12,
2-12, and then 15-31 to finish the year. It kills a season. You can't go on streaks like that in a short season. So, it's just a common narrative, really, for what the Rockies have gone through over the years.
Yeah, and you look at their off-season changes that they've had. I think it becomes pretty clear that. Look, I'm just gonna say it. I think it looks pretty clear that ownership is worried more about making sure that revenue is high. They're probably looking to bounce back from whatever they have suffered last year. They had an opportunity, at least having lost Nolan Arenado, they had an opportunity to at least go out and use some of that money that they had just freed up to acquire maybe some pieces to help them out. They didn't really do that. I mean, as you can see, the best player they may have acquired in the offseason, CJ Crone, Robert Stevenson, Austin Gomber. This is a team that doesn't seem dedicated to putting the best team on the field. Derek Rodriguez, a couple years ago, once upon a time, was actually a pretty good up and coming pitcher with the Giants.
Right.
Austin Gomber, Tony Losi, Jake Sommers, the three of the pitchers that they acquired in the Nolan Arenado trade. Robert Stevenson, they acquired via trade from Cincinnati. Jordan Sheffield, I don't believe he is related to Gary. They acquired him via the Rule 5 from Los Angeles. And then obviously, as I mentioned, they signed CJ Crone and also the other first baseman, Greg Bird, and then Mateo Gil was another player that they acquired from the Cardinals. Taking a look at some of their subtractions they've had, AJ Ramos and Tim Collins, neither of them on paper they were good players for them last year, but neither of them really pitched at all. I don't believe Ramos actually ended up appearing in a game. And Tim Collins, I believe, appeared in 3, or Ramos appeared in 3, and Tim Collins did not appear last year. So, no harm, no foul. Neither of them really made a factor. Jeff Hoffman, they traded to Cincinnati. Tony Wolters and Drew Butera, the 2 catchers, they left in free agency. Daniel Murphy announced his retirement. Nolan Arenado, as I mentioned, traded him to St. Louis. Kevin Pillar and David Dahl and Matt Kemp, all 3 outfielders. Kemp played mostly DH for the Rockies last year. All 3 of them left in free agency. What are your thoughts with how the Rockies have ran through their offseason at this point?
Listen, I think the Nolan Arenado trade just kind of gives a testament to what we've been learning about the Rockies front office. For those of you who don't know, Arenado signed an 8-year contract with the club. It was the highest contract they'd ever offered to a player and signed a player on. And this was just 2 years ago they did this. And immediately after signing this contract, Rockies GM Jeff Burdich comes out and starts putting Arenado on trade block. You don't do that to a cornerstone franchise player, especially a guy like Arenado, who they haven't had a player like him since Troy Tulowitzki.
Yeah.
And they did something similar to Tulowitzki too, just not immediately after signing the contract. I think pretty much what they've done with Arenado, it amazes me that he's the only guy they've lost, or the only notable guy they've lost in the offseason. I think as far as additions go, some of these guys could be good additions for them. I think Derek Rodriguez has a chance to bounce back. They got the nice thing the Rockies have is they have a manager who was a pitcher once in Buddy Black, and Black has found ways to find success or to get his pitchers success in Coors Field, which again, that's something we haven't seen very much of. So the fact that he's been able to get a lot out of his starters up to this point it's a big deal. So Derek Rodriguez has a chance. Austin Gomber has a chance too. He's a young prospect with the Cardinals that the Rockies got in the Arenado deal. He was the main headliner, I guess, in that trade. Robert Stevenson, he's a bullpen piece from the Reds. I'm not sure how that's going to work out. He's going from a hitter ballpark to a hitter's paradise ballpark. CJ Crone, yeah, it was a good signing, but he's a non-roster invite, so there's no guarantee he's going to make the team. And considering that the Rockies have Josh Fuentes, who is the cousin of Arenado, by the way, I don't know if they've figured that Fuentes is going to be a primary player for them this year. I imagine if he is, that makes Crone's job a lot harder to make the team. It might even make it harder for Greg Bird to make the team. But I don't know. The Rockies just... it kind of feels like they slapped their fans in the face a little bit by dealing Arenado so early in his contract, basically forcing him to one out. And now they're stuck with a core of players that there's no guarantee that they're going to even be able to, they're going to be on the team at the end of the year. I don't really know how I feel about their offseason. I think it's obvious that they're trying to rebuild. I think they needed to do this for a little while now. They probably should have started doing this after the 2019 season. considering what the Padres have done and what the Dodgers have done. Their window closed as quickly as it opened, it closed. So maybe they should have started doing this in 2020. But I'm still just set on the fact that if you're going to sign a guy like Arenado to such a massive contract, why are you going to dangle him that quickly? And they got fleeced in that trade too. I hate to say it, but they did. When Austin Gomber is your headliner, and then you get some prospects who aren't even ready to appear in the show this year, they got fleeced. And they also, on top of that, gave I think it was like $50,000 to the Cardinals.
50 million.
50 million. They gave them 50 million to cover the Arenado deal. So I don't know what's going on in that front office over there. It's baffling. It's insulting in a way to a fan base that hasn't really experienced winning. I'm not gonna dump on them too much longer, but I think what they've done, they're obviously in rebuild mode now, and you just hope that you can get the most out of the guys that you've acquired. But considering the history of how things have gone for the franchise, it's not easy to be optimistic about it at this point. If fans are pessimistic, I don't blame them, because how is Austin Gomber going to do? How's Derek Rodriguez going to do? Robert Stevenson, is he even going to be an improvement to the bullpen? You know, it's just difficult. It sucks.
Yeah, and it wasn't that long ago that they gave out, big contracts to multiple relief pitchers. I think once their Wade Davis and their Jake McGee, once those guys kind of fizzled out and their contracts turned bad, they ended up being, $10 to $12 million paperweights essentially.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's when the Rockies were like, listen, we're done. We're done trying to put this thing together. Let's just cut bait, get rid of who we can, and then just start over completely. Which, I mean, I think it's a little bit of an overreaction, but it's neither here nor there. Looking at their lineup and how their lineup projects to kind of sort itself out entering this year, I like Ramel Tapia, the center fielder, to lead things off. He is very thin. He is very skinny.
Mm-hmm.
And he's also very tall, very lanky out there, I guess people like to say. I have him leading off. I have Charlie Blackmon, the longtime right fielder. I have him hitting second. I believe the beard and the hair is just going to be longer and bigger than ever before, as it is every year now. Trevor Story, the shortstop, I have him hitting third. I have CJ Crone, the first baseman, hitting fourth. And I tell you what, CJ Crone could potentially hit 50 dingers this year.
Yeah.
He's always been a good power hitter, even dating back to towards the end of his Angels days. So I think it is possible that, maybe this is his big breakout year, kind of like what he had in that 1 year in Minnesota. And Rogers, I have him hitting fifth, manning second base. I have Ryan McMahon, the third baseman, hitting sixth. Hitting seventh is the left fielder Sam Hilliard, playing in left field. Hitting eighth is the catcher Elias Diaz, who I'm actually a big fan of him. And then I have the pitcher spot to round it out.
My lineup looks similar.
Mm-hmm.
I guess the nice thing about the Rockies offense is they do have some young guys with high ceilings, most notably in Rogers and Hilliard.
Yep.
I have Brendan Rodgers leading off as a second baseman. He had a shoulder injury his rookie year that cut his rookie season short, and he didn't play last season. So here's to hoping that in a full season, he can get a good amount of work, get a good amount of games in. He can prove his talent again. He was really hyped up when he got called up in 2019, but I don't know. I'll be honest, I forgot he was even on the team just because he hasn't played in 2 years. But I'm excited for him. I think this is going to be a good chance for him to show his value again. I think this will be a good boost of confidence to get him in there on opening day, have him be the primary second baseman. Trevor Story, I got him hitting second, was power hitting shortstop. Charlie Blackmon, I got him hitting third and right field. I think his leadoff days are about done. He can still do some leading off, but I don't think the Rockies are looking at him in that aspect anymore, especially because he's more of a power hitter and he's lost a lot of that speed that he once had. So I think he's going to be more of a middle order guy this year. CJ Crone, I got him hitting cleanup at first base. I know I said that it's probably going to be really difficult for him to make the opening day team, but I think he will find a way on the roster. Ryan McMahon, the third baseman, I got him hitting fifth. This guy's skinny and lanky too, and tall,
Mm-hmm.
but he's got some pop in that bat. He can hit to all fields. I think he's capable of putting up a good average if he gets a good amount of games in. Um, I don't know if he's a third baseman necessarily. I think I like him more as a second baseman and first baseman, but this guy is he's at least a good replacement for Arenado. He's a good replacement within the team.
Mm-hmm.
Fans at least know him. So I think he'll be fine down there, but in the future, I do see him more as a right side infielder. Sam Hilliard, the left fielder, I got him hitting sixth. I think he's going to have a big year, his first full season in the majors. I'm expecting good things from him. I think he's going to be a big contributor to their offense this year. Raimel Tapia, the center fielder, I got him hitting seventh. Elias Diaz, the catcher they acquired from Pittsburgh last season, I think he's going to be the primary guy this year. I got him hitting eighth. Then the pitcher spot, I've got them due up ninth.
Yeah, it's another year of at least, at the very least, a serviceable lineup.
Right.
They don't typically have a blow your socks off lineup. They haven't since their, like Matt Holliday, Troy Tulowitzki, heydays, but it's still a decent lineup. Right? If they can get some real production out of guys like Tapia and Hilliard and McMahon, this could be a serviceable lineup.
Exactly.
Um, Looking at their rotations, how the rotation figures to shake out, I like German Marquez to be the ace of the staff again. Um, German Marquez is kind of defied the odds with his, he's had a couple good seasons now in Colorado, playing in Colorado every day, or every fifth day, I should say. But Marquez has proven that not every pitcher is bad in Colorado at this point. He's kind of, I would say probably not since Ubaldo Jimenez. They haven't had a guy, put up these many multiple seasons of successful outings. Kyle Freeland, who has very much been affected by the Colorado atmosphere, the lefty, I have him as the number 2. He's still a very good pitcher.
Right.
And I believe that if he were to find his way to another team that ERA would probably drop sub 3 almost immediately. I'll have to look at his split stats to see just how different it is. John Gray, I have him as the number 3. Antonio Sensatella is the number 4, and the new lefty Austin Gomber is the number 5. Like I said, every one of these pitchers, it seems like the big thing for Colorado pitchers is they usually have 1 year where they kind of break their mold, and everyone's like, whoa, like this guy might be someone who can continuously beat the thin air up here in Colorado, like what Kyle Freeland had a couple years ago. Someone will come up, they'll have one really good season, and then they'll immediately regress back to the norm.
Right.
It seems to be the case with more starting pitchers that pitch for Colorado than pitchers that don't.
Well, Freeland did have a nice little bounce back last year, so I think he is. I think 2019 probably was more fluky.
Mm-hmm.
Although I will say, as far as him being a sub 3 ERA pitcher in Denver, he may not be that kind of pitcher there. Freeland is a local kid, though. He's from the area, so I think he does have an upper hand in that sense, where he has pitched in high altitude pretty much since his playing days started. So I think he does have an upper hand in that sense. He knows how to do it. He's a little more experienced compared to other guys, but my rotation actually rounds out the same way. And I think German Marquez is the ace of this staff. And you're right, since Ubaldo Jimenez, they haven't really had a starter like Marquez. He's been relatively consistent. He has his bad outings, but he has more good outings than he does bad. He has kind of defied what Coors Field does to pitchers. He's a really exciting guy to watch, and I will say he's the only pitcher I've ever intentionally bought a ticket for to go watch pitch, just because he's that good. He's that fun to watch. So I think he will be the ace, and then Freeland, I like him as the 2, and John Gray, I'm hoping this guy can have a good season. There was at one point he got demoted to the bullpen because he just couldn't figure out the struggles in the rotation. He's shown flashes of being really good though, so I think it's there. He just needs to put everything together. Um, but also, it wouldn't surprise me if John Gray was used as a trade piece at some point. I think he's that highly coveted where if the Rockies are in rebuild mode, they could get some really good prospects for him. It wouldn't shock me one bit if at some point this year that was to happen. But I'm hoping that he has a good season. I'm hoping that he can like figure things out again because the Rockies need their pitchers to step up. Their offense is going to be consistent. It's not going to, I don't think it's an overpowering offense, but it's going to be a consistent offense at the minimum. Their pitching staff, though, outside of Marquez, they really need like Freeland to be back to the 2017-2018 guy he was. They need John Gray to be that high draft pick ceiling that he was. They need Antonio Senzatella and Austin Gomber to at least get 5 or 6 innings a day or an outing out there. This rotation really is going to be what carries this team if they expect to have any kind of winnings this year. It's the rotation that they need to step up.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it'll be interesting to see if they're actually able to step up or not. Looking at their bullpen, um, it's definitely quiet. Not necessarily in a bad way. I've always been a big Michael Gibbons and Robert Stevenson and Carlos Estevez fan, so I think it does have some potential. But Daniel Bard looks as though he'll probably garner closing duties again this season. Great comeback story, for a guy who hadn't pitched in multiple years. Michael Gibbons and Robert Stevenson, I think, both will vie for some late inning work. Yancy Almonte, Scott Oberg, Carlos Estevez, Jairo Diaz, and Jordan Sheffield. I have those guys rounding it out. It's not a bad bullpen. It's certainly not a good bullpen. You could argue their best relief pitcher as of right now might be Oberg, might be Bard, and that's saying something. So it'll be interesting to see how they kind of navigate that bullpen throughout the season.
Well, I mean, in their bullpen too, a lot of the guys that have recently come up in the bullpen are guys that they've signed or drafted. Most notably, like Carlos Estevez, Yancy Almonte, Scott Oberg, even those are guys that have kind of come through the system and have been able to work through those struggles. Daniel Bard, again, he's another great comeback story. I do like him as the closer, but the thing that kind of concerns me is can he repeat that success he had in the short season last year? I'm rooting for him, though. I hope that he can keep that success going. It's really hard to match that. He was the comeback player of the year in the National League this season. So I'm curious to see how he handles a full 162. I'm curious to see if he can maintain that same success that he had last year. Michael Gibbons, I think he's going to be a good setup guy. I think he could take closer duties maybe later down the line if Bard doesn't do so well. Robert Stevenson, Scott Oberg, Yancy Almonte, Tyler Kinley, those are all guys. Carlos Estevez, too. Those are all guys I can see being 7th inning or multiple innings pitchers. I think Stevenson might fall more into multiple innings because he was a starter at one point, so he's capable of pitching a little longer out of the pen if they need it. I think he's a good addition in that sense where if the starters do get inflated, they get taken out early because they've given up a ton of runs. Stevenson's a guy who can step in and kind of limit the damage, eat up some innings to save the bullpen. I think that'll be a good fit for them, as well as Ryan Castellani. Castellani was a starter for them last year, majority of the season. So I think he's another guy to look out for to possibly be an innings eater for this team. Tyler Kinley, I wanted to touch on him real quick. He was another young pitcher that the Marlins just kind of traded off. He was with them in 2019. The Rockies got him last season. Didn't do great last season, but in his 2019 stint with the Marlins, he did record a 3.65 ERA in 52 games. So I think this guy has some potential there that Rockies fans should keep an eye on. I think he is capable of putting up some decent numbers. If he can put an ERA up closer to the 4, like the high 4s, I think that's a win for them. Pretty much if any of these bullpen guys can have an ERA between 3.5 and 4.5, I think it's a win. Ideally, you'd want better numbers, but it's Coors Field again.
Yeah.
You're bound to have some nights that there's just going to be runs put on the board like no other. So I don't think this is a terrible bullpen either. It's not a strong bullpen by any means. But one advantage the Rockies have here is they have guys that they have brought up through the system and know how to pitch at these higher altitudes and have found some minimal success over the years. And like you said, Scott Oberg's probably the best reliever they have right now. He's been their most consistent guy over the years. I think if he's healthy and can kind of lead the charge, um, I think the bullpen will probably be okay. I'm actually really not that worried about this bullpen going into the season. I think it's decent enough that it'll be consistent. I think they'll be able to limit damage. I know the bullpen has been an issue for the Rockies for a while. It's been a pretty historical thing for them as their bullpen has been pretty problematic at times. But I think this year the bullpen looks good enough that they'll be able to kind of carry the weight. They'll be able to help the team out as the season goes on because they've had issues more in years, especially when they haven't been successful. They've had more issues of blowing games, and it's been primarily the bullpen that's done that. I think as long as the bullpen anchors everything down, the Rockies have chances of winning games. They just have to keep those big innings off the board, so to say.
Yeah, like I mentioned earlier, it wasn't that long ago they gave out some of the biggest free agent contracts to relief pitchers in Major League history. And I think that now they're probably trying to build that bullpen from within, not necessarily to save money, but to avoid having to deal with a guy that you just paid, $15 million a year, go out there and stink. So I think they're definitely going to try to see what they can do building internally.
Well,
Looking at go ahead.
The thing with the Rockies is they're a team that has to build within on their pitching and on their bullpen because that's the way they're going to get the most success. Bringing someone in from another team has proven not to work for them. We saw it with Wade Davis and Brian Shaw and Jake McGee. The Rockies are a team they have to build within if they're going to get successful pitching.
Yes, correct. All right, looking at some three prospects to watch here. Some quiet names, some names not many people know about in the Rockies system. Even Brendan Rodgers, who was the third overall pick a few years ago, he kind of got tossed by the wayside there for a little bit. People kind of forgot that he was actually as good of a prospect as he was. The first guy I want to go over is I believe his name is pronounced Elajuris. Elajuris Montero, I believe, is how it is pronounced. He is the number 7 prospect for the Rockies right now. He's a third baseman. He is 22 years old. The highest level he has reached is AA, and he was probably outside of Austin Gomber, the second best prospect the Rockies acquired in the Nolan Arenado trade. Montero advanced to full season ball. He actually garnered Class A Midwest League MVP honors in 2018. He led the league in batting average, sitting at 322, slugging at 529, and OPS at 910 before finishing his age 19 campaign at Class A Advanced Palm Beach. Unfortunately, he was challenged with a little bit of an aggressive move up the ladder to AA to open 2019. He actually struggled to find his rhythm at the plate, battled a pair of injuries. The most significant, I believe, was actually a broken hamate bone in his left hand in late May, which sidelined him for about 2 months. So he'll be looking to regain his stroke, being that, there was no 2020 season. Physically, as you can see from his picture there, he already looks the part of a big league hitter. He's 6'3". I think he's like 231 pounds or something like that. That's probably a little different, but he hits the ball like a major league player too. Combining bat speed with a feel for the barrel, generates hard contact, plus raw power. Unfortunately, he is a right-handed hitter, so he generates all of that from the right side of the plate. Unfortunately, he's kind of had a free swinging approach in the higher levels. It worked for him below Double A, where the pitching competition in particular can sometimes be lacking, so to say. So his strikeout rate was really high. I believe it was sitting at like 30%. His whiff rate, his swinging miss rate was 19.3%. So a couple high rates, something that he's going to definitely have to work on. Those were both the highest marks in the Cardinals system in 2019. There was also based on a small sample, something that'll have to occur naturally as he gains experience against upper level pitching, as he will regain some of that discipline and work himself out of it. The next guy I want to cover is Helcris Olivares. He's the number 18 prospect, primarily a starting pitcher. He's a 20-year-old in rookie ball right now. Believe it or not, there were actually some in the Rockies front office who were as excited for Olivares as they were about Ubaldo Jimenez nearly 2 decades ago now. He's got 3 above average pitches when all is said and done. He's still growing. I think he's somewhere around 6'3" and just over 200 pounds. From what they've said, he's going to gain another inch or two and some more weight. So he's only going to keep adding strength, meaning that I'm fastball that scouts have said usually sits 93 to 95 and jumps out of his hand might end up 96 to 97. Which would just be crazy. He's still working on refining his secondary stuff, however. Has very good feel for the spin on his breaking ball, which is flash plus. There's good action at times on his changeup. Has struggled with control and command. He actually lost a feel for the zone a few times in 2019, according to scouts. But he did well to make adjustments. I believe that there's enough confidence there that he can get back at it. Another guy who, like Alejiris Montero, kind of struggled as he is reaching a new level. So it'll be interesting to see how he can bounce back from that. The third prospect I want to cover is Daniel Montano. He's the number 23 prospect, listed as the left person on your on the screen in that little picture there. He's the left player. I actually couldn't find a picture of him outside of this one. So very limited exposure. His highest level reached is single A. He was actually ranked number 16 on MLB's pipeline among the top 30 international prospects in the 2015-16 signing period. He received $2 million to sign with the Rockies. Once he came stateside for the 2018 season, he actually performed really well. His move to full season ball in 2019 did not go nearly as well. But based on his performance, Montano has yet to prove he belongs on high prospect lists. He hasn't really excelled at anything he's done. He has a little bit of power, a little bit of speed, a relatively pedestrian batting average. He still shows glimpses of raw tools that made him a hot commodity when he was ready to sign. It's disappointed some that he hasn't been able to translate the potential he had then into some production yet, but he still has the chance to hit and play good defense. When he got to Asheville, which is their single A club, he had a tendency to swing at nearly everything, which, kind of left his approach a little traveling. I guess their stadium in Asheville has a short right field porch. So a lot of scouts were worried that he kind of got lured in by that to some degree. Like I said, has a tendency to swing it a lot. He does run well. He can steal a base, and he has enough range to play center field. He's also seen time in right field. His defensive versatility probably has him projected as like a career backup outfielder, like a fourth outfielder or something like that. If he can continue to work on his hitting, then he very well could see some starting time with some major league clubs moving forward. But yeah, I mean, it's not a loaded farm system by any means, but a very decent farm system to say the least.
A lot of their farm talent is up on the team right now, or at least the highly touted, because there was a time they had a really good farm system. Now it's about average, I would say. Real quick, Helcris Olivares, He pitched the other day for them in a spring.
Yeah, that's the picture from him from the other day.
Yeah, so yeah, it makes sense of why they're really high on him. The three prospects I wanted to cover, I mainly picked these three because I think these three are going to be very close to immediate impact for this team, especially considering where the team is. The first guy I wanted to cover is Ryan Velade. He's a shortstop, number 4 in the Rockies system. He's 22 years old. Highest level reached is high A ball. So far in the minor leagues, he has a very healthy slate of games on him, 285 games to be exact. He's a 369 on base percentage with a 428 slugging. This guy doesn't have the most power, but playing in higher elevated ballparks, his power numbers are probably gonna go up. He's got 22 homers to his name right now, 136 RBI, so he does drive in runs. He does have a bit of a strikeout problem, 222 strikeouts, although he still has more games played than strikeouts. So I always see that as kind of a good thing. He doesn't like over strikeout. He will take his walks. He has 132 of those, so it's decent. I'd say he probably does lean a little more to free swinging, but he balances it out pretty well with the walks. 46 stolen bases. He does have some speed on him. He has a decent 291 batting average up to this point. The reason I think he could be a pretty close impact is Trevor Story's a free agent at the end of the year. It's not really clear what the Rockies' plans are, if they're going to re-sign him or if they're going to let him walk. If they let him walk, I think Velade is a guy that fans should keep an eye on. He's probably going to be part of the future. That is, if Brendan Rodgers doesn't move over to shortstop, I would say this guy has a really decent chance of being on the team. I wouldn't say this year, but probably next year. This year, if there's injuries and he's playing well enough in the minors and they need some reinforcements, but I think next year he has a better chance of being on the club. The next guy I want to look at is Colton Welker. There was a time not too long ago he was in their top 5. He's dropped down to the number 8 prospect in the system right now. He's a third baseman. He's also, his highest level reach is AA. There's some speculation that this guy will be on the team this year. It's possible. He has regressed a little bit, or he didn't have a great minor league season in 2019 though, so I think it slowed his development. But now that Arenado is out of the picture, there's a really good chance that this guy could make it onto the team this year, if not next year. 330 games in the minor leagues, 364 on base percentage, of 469 slugging. He has 34 homers to his name, so this guy has power. 204 RBI. He will drive in runs. 241 strikeouts. I wouldn't say it's a problem, but it could be a problem. I think that's kind of one thing that scouts have been a little concerned about, is he is kind of a free swinger as well. 105 walks though, so he's not afraid to take his bases that way. 18 stolen bases, not a big stolen base threat, but he does have a 313 batting average. I would expect to see him on the team this year. I think, especially if they start him off in AAA. I'm pretty sure he's on the spring training roster this year. So if they start him off in AAA, I'd say there's a really good chance that he will make an impact on the team. I think this is a third baseman for their future. They drafted him a few years ago out of high school. I think this is a guy they still feel very highly on. He's not Nolan Arenado by any means, but he will be a good addition for them, I think, especially if he can continue putting up some good numbers in the minor leagues. And then the last guy I want to look at, he had some major league time last year, but he definitely needs more minor league time. Tommy Doyle, he's the number 20 prospect. He's a relief pitcher. I think he had an ERA north of 12 last season in a very small sample size of games, but his minor league numbers are a lot better to look at. 110 games, he's 12-12, 3.12 ERA. He's got 40 saves across those 110 games, so he does have some closing experience. Could be a future closer for them if they feel like he's good enough to be in that position. 115 and a third innings pitched, so he averages roughly an inning for per outing that he goes. So he's not a long reliever by any means. He's strictly been limited to about an inning of work per outing. He has 132 strikeouts, only 35 walks, so this guy has pretty decent command. He will strike guys out. He will walk some guys on occasion, but he's got really decent command with his pitches. 8 home runs allowed, a 1.21 whip, and a 236 batting average again. So he does give up some contact. He will give up base runners. But for the most part, this is a guy who will record his outs via the strikeout. I think that's going to be huge in Denver. If he can maintain those strikeout numbers, much like Olivares, I think that'll be big. Pitching in a high altitude stadium, strikeouts are huge in a stadium like Coors Field. You want to keep the ball on the ground, but two, if you can get strikeouts, it keeps the ball from going in the air. Because there are days at that ballpark where anything that goes in the air will fly out. I have seen that. I have witnessed that firsthand. So I think Tommy Doyle is a guy to keep an eye on. He definitely needs more time in the minor leagues, though. His highest level reached before last year was only an A ball. So there's still a lot of development there, but he's off to a good start to his development. I think he could speed up the process too if they let him really take his time down in the minors this year. I know he's a little older as far as prospects go, but if you're going to be a pitcher at Coors Field, I think you want that development to go as long as you possibly can before you actually bring these guys up.
Yeah, it definitely figures to, as we mentioned, it's a decent one. Not necessarily a deep as of right now prospect pool, but it's all right. It's all right.
Yeah,
and it's only going to get better as some of these. I saw that they have a lot of really really young guys. They even have a couple guys in their top 30 who haven't even played a professional game yet. So I think in a year or two, once these guys get another year or two older, I think that their system's going to get a lot better to where it usually is, which is towards the top of the league.
I agree with that 100%.
Looking at some projections that we have for the Rockies entering 2021, I think at a ceiling, they probably are a 74 win team. 74 and 88 is a ceiling. I think they could be 62 and 100 as a floor. I could be convinced to go either way on both my ceiling and my floor. I'm not really sure what in the world they're going to be this year. I know they're not going to be necessarily competitive, but I don't know if they're going to be like a below or if they're going to be a bad team. Like, I'm not sure entirely yet. But my three key factors, one, Nolan Arenado is seriously gone. It's so crazy to think. Number two, Coors Field is not nice to pitchers. It looks nice. It's a very nice ballpark. Doesn't like pitchers. The area doesn't like pitchers either. And the bats that are in Coors Field don't usually like baseballs. Usually hit them a very long way. The third key factor is that they have loads of unproven talent on the team, whether it be some of their younger guys in their bullpen, or whether it be some of the guys that are still young and unproven. Even Brandon Rogers, he's still young and unproven in the major league level. So they have a lot of young, unproven talent that will need to figure out what it is before they take the next step.
Yeah, mine's really similar to yours. I see their ceiling about 72 and 90, their floor 60 and 102. The Rockies have never had 100 losses in a season. They're one of two teams that have never had it.
Wow.
If you can name the other team, I think maybe let's do that as a trivia question. Who's the other team that doesn't have 100 losses? But the Rockies are one of them. I'm hoping that they can keep it that way, but I think if there is a year that they are probably closer, this is probably the year it happens, unfortunately. My three key factors, again, Nolan Arenado is actually gone. He was their pinnacle in the offense. Sure, they got Trevor Story, but when you only have Trevor Story and Charlie Blackmon, only two guys that have really proven themselves on offense, and you lose a cornerstone guy like Arenado, who was averaging 38 to 39, 40 homers a year, that's a big loss for the offense. It shakes everything up within the organization. So that's my first factor. The second one, I know I said I wasn't too worried about their bullpen, but their bullpen historically has been shaky for them. It's been a big demise for them in the past. I think because they have some guys like Robert Stevenson, Daniel Bard, even Michael Gibbons, that haven't really pitched enough games in Colorado. I think there's going to be times the bullpen is going to be very difficult to watch. And I think, again, it could be a demise for them. If they can at least get that figured out, though, I think they have a chance. But if the bullpen starts to go bad, this team is not going to be poised for a lot of success. And then my third factor, what happens to the rest of the core? Now that Arenado's gone, what do they do with Trevor Story? What do they do with Charlie Blackmon? What do they do with German Marquez, Kyle Freeland, John Gray? When you traded a cornerstone franchise player like Arenado, it seems as if most of the time more moves are ready to come, and it's only you gotta wonder, are they gonna keep guys like Blackmon, Story, Gray around? Are they gonna do that, or are they gonna trade them as well? And if they do trade the rest of the core, expect to see a lot of young guys playing on the team majority of the year, which isn't always a bad thing. It's a good way to get a look at what your future is going to be. But more times than not, there's going to be a lot of lows than highs. And I think just with where the Rockies are right now, that is something that is very realistic. That's a realistic thing that can happen.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Unfortunately, like we mentioned, it's going to be a big step back for them. Trevor Story, I believe, is a free agent at the end of this season.
Yep.
So if they want to move him, they're going to have to do it quickly and maximize on that. As always, you can find us on our social medias, whether it be Instagram, you can find us at Real Dugout Talk. TikTok, you can find us at Dugout Talk. Twitter, you can find us at Dugout Talk 1. You can always find us here on YouTube at Dugout Talk, and you can also find us on Facebook at Real Dugout Talk. Appreciate you guys watching today. It's been fun covering the National League West. I think outside of the American League East, probably my favorite division, mainly because I don't know what it is about the Diamondbacks, Rockies, Padres, Dodgers, and Giants, but I kind of like all those teams. I like how they all are usually pretty competitive, pretty rivalry-ish with each other. So it's always nice to see some good baseball played out there in the West Coast.
I think the NL West has some hidden rivalries. I've said it for years that the Diamondbacks and Rockies is actually a very underrated rivalry. Mm-hmm. And when both teams are playing well, they're actually really fun to watch. Even when they're not, I don't know what it is. For some reason, even when they're both kind of mediocre, they're still fun to watch for whatever reason. But yeah, I mean, I wish the Rockies episode had more highlights to it, but it's definitely just, it kind of feels like this is where they are as a team, and it's going to be kind of a dismal year for them. Nice thing is, though, Rockies fans do show up to the ballpark. They show up for their team. I have a lot of respect for Rockies fans in that way. Even weekday games, they show up pretty well. I don't think I've ever really seen the stadium empty except for the one time I went during a blizzard, but I'll talk about that another time. But we're going to cover the San Francisco Giants tomorrow. The next three teams are going to be our California-based clubs. If you know any Rockies fans, be sure to share this podcast with them. Be sure to just keep an eye on this podcast, too. It's been getting a lot of attention recently. Mm-hmm. We're very grateful for those who have been sharing this and kind of putting us out there in that way. We love the help, and we just appreciate the support in that way. But again, we're going to be covering the Giants tomorrow. Should be a fun episode as we kind of wrap up our season breakdowns. We're getting towards the finish line on that. But until then, we'll see you guys tomorrow.
See you guys.